Hello, hello, hello. Here we have Hume Part 2. These from section mostly 4 and 5 of the Enquiry. Okay? But we're going to start with a review from last time because this core of Hume's empiricism is most important. Okay? So here we go. Here's our summary for the next few slides. Hume's first starting point question, what's in the mind? There are two kinds, impressions and ideas. Impressions are actual experiences, and ideas are the remembering or thinking about them. He then further divides impressions up into two kinds, inner and outer. With inner impressions are the feelings and emotions, those that come from inside of us, just like it sounds. Outer impressions are impressions of sense, those that come from outside of us, okay, the sense experience. He also divides ideas up into two kinds. Remember John Locke, right? Remember Locke? Simple and compound. Most of our ideas are compounded, but they're all reducible or analyzable into simple ideas. Then we have the relationship between impressions and ideas, or the copy thesis. An idea is a copy of an impression, so that if you have no ideas, you have no impressions. That's the first core of Hume's empiricism. The second core is the meaning thesis, and that is the meaning of an idea is the impression that it copies, and that's all the meaning there is. Remember, that's his way of truly trying to destroy rationalism. So, you have impressions, the mind copies them into ideas, all of this is automatic. Okay? As the mind copies them into ideas, the mind associates these ideas based on three principles: resemblance, contiguity in space-time, and cause and effect. Okay? So the raw data that comes in, the mind then creates the world quite literally. This is a very cool sort of idea, although it's probably false. Okay, now, new stuff, section 4. While there are three ways of associating ideas, Hume says that there are two kinds of thought. Okay? Reasoning about relations of idea and reasoning about matters of fact. Okay? In the big book, Hume's Enquiry, section 4, page 588, we're going to start with the first paragraph. All the objects of human reason or inquiry may naturally be divided into two kinds, namely, relations of ideas and matters of fact. There we go. That's two kinds of thoughts. Of the first kind are the sciences of geometry, algebra, and arithmetic. And in short, every affirmation which is either intuitively or demonstrably certain that the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the squares of the two sides is a proposition which expresses a relation between these figures. That 3 times 5 is equal to half of 30, indeed it is, exposes a relation between these numbers. So check this out. Propositions of this kind are discoverable by the mere operation of thought without dependence on what is anywhere existent in the universe. Though there were never a circle or triangle in nature, the truths demonstrated by Euclid would forever retain their certainty and evidence. Okay, check it out. The prime example for relations of ideas is mathematics and geometry. Okay? These notions are intuitively certain and intuitively and demonstrably certain. They are ultimately provable. So that as such they are deductive in this regard. Their denial entails a contradiction. If you deny that 3 times 5 is equal to half of 30, that'll take you to a contradiction, right? So this kind of thought is about the relations of ideas only, and they say nothing about existence. As Hume said, though there were never a circle or triangle in nature, the truths demonstrated by Euclid will forever retain their certainty and evidence. So all that stuff we know about triangles would be true even if there were no triangles in nature. So, they give us certainty, but they tell us nothing about existence. They're merely about the relations of ideas. Okay? The next kind of thought. Matters of fact, which are the second kinds of human reason, are not ascertained in the same manner. Nor is our evidence of their truth, however great, of a like nature with the foregoing. This is right here. The contrary of every matter of fact is still possible, because it can never imply a contradiction, and is conceived by the mind with the same facility and distinctness as if ever so conformable to reality. Check this out. That the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition and implies no more contradiction in the affirmation that it will rise. Every truth, every statement or matter of fact is contrary is still possible. Okay? We should in vain, therefore, to demonstrate its falsehood. Were it demonstratively false, it would imply a contradiction and could never be distinctly conceived by the mind. Okay. Notice this. These are based on experience. They are never demonstrably certain. They offer us probability only, and their denial never entails a contradiction. So its opposite is still a possibility. These are actually made true by what exists, and they are based on my experience of the world. So this type of reasoning is made true. These propositions are made true by what exists, exactly the opposite of relations of ideas. Okay? Now, it gives me faith that similar causes will have similar effects, and the future will be like the past. Note, though, this is faith only, not knowledge. Or at least not certain knowledge, not the kind of knowledge we get from the first kind. So note that association of ideas leads us inevitably to believe certain things about the world. Okay, now this slide comes relevant here. Hume's distinction, which has come to be known as Hume's fork. This is incredibly important for everything to come in Hume. Okay, was very influential in the 20th century. It is his means of truly destroying rationalism. It directly denies the rationalist assumption that reason alone can give us knowledge of the world. Remember, that's exactly what the rationalists say, that reason can, without the aid of sense experience, yield us some knowledge. This is Hume's way of saying, no, it can't. Okay? It shows us that no matter of fact can be demonstrably certain, and that reasoning about relations of ideas can give us no knowledge of the world, but it only reveals the relations of our ideas. That is, the methods of rationalism cannot yield knowledge about matters of fact. In sum, statement about relations of ideas are known by a priori reasoning, apart from experience, right? Or as Hume says, by the mere operation of thought. Statements about matters of fact cannot be known this way. Statements about matters of fact, on the other hand, are made true by what exists, and their denial can never imply a contradiction. Statements about relations of ideas are truly and totally independent of what exists, and their denial does imply a contradiction. I went through all that because this is core to everything that comes after this for Hume, because all of this is important for Hume's critique of metaphysical ideas. Okay? And ultimately also to his critique of miracles. That's coming up a couple of times here. Okay? Now, note that section 4 is entitled Skeptical Doubts. Okay? Hume raises two kinds of doubts. Those about his own theory, which he answers, and those about metaphysical issues, which he claims are unanswerable. He does, however, and he has to do this, give us an account of how we come to believe those metaphysical things. We'll see that ultimately it isn't by reason, but our passions, but by our passions that we come to those beliefs. Remember Hume's naturalism. Okay? So, let's get to Hume's primary doubt. His primary doubt in both cases, that is his own and about metaphysical ideas, is about cause and effect. Okay? So he asks, how do we come to our knowledge of cause and effect? Okay? I mean, he's been using this idea, and it does seem immensely important to him. I mean, after all, it's one of his bases for associating ideas. Okay? Now, how did I learn it? That is, what is the origin of the idea of causality? Okay? If it's relations of ideas, remember though, it tells us nothing about existence. So in other words, Descartes' way of knowing it can't work. Or is about matters of fact. Notice this. The idea isn't innate, so I must show what impressions give rise to it. Okay? That is, the idea, for Hume, the idea of causality arises in the mind when we experience certain relations between objects. That is, you get causality through the senses. But, from this, at best you can get only A causes B. We're talking about the basic idea of cause and effect, that the effect gets its reality from the cause, that the same causes will always give rise to the same effect. You know, that really hardcore idea of cause and effect, you see, just from sheer sense experience, you don't get that. Okay? You don't get that. Okay? So notice this, again, from the senses, the best you can get is only A causes B. But what kind of relation does this indicate between A and B? Experience, Hume says, offers us three sorts of relations. First, there's the relation of contiguity, for A and B are always close together, right? The cause and the effect always occur right together, one after the other. Okay? Second, there's priority in time. For A, the cause, always precedes B, the effect. And third, this one's important, there's constant conjunction. For we always see A followed by B. But what about the basic notion of causality? That causality is some kind of a necessary relation. Okay? That is, what about any necessary connection between A and B? Okay? Let's go to page 589. We're going to look at a couple of his paragraphs here, because Hume is very good on this, right? In that second paragraph was the top of 589 there. This is in section 4. He says that, let's start with that paragraph. I shall venture to affirm, as a general proposition which admits of no exception, that the knowledge of this relation, that is, of cause and effect, in any instance is not attained by reasonings a priori, but entirely arises from experience when we find that any particular objects are constantly conjoined with each other. Let an object be presented to a man of ever so strong natural reason and abilities. If that object is entirely new to him, he will not be able, by the most accurate examination of its sensible qualities, to discover any causes or its effects. Adam, this is a good example, though his rational faculties are supposed entirely perfect from the very first, could not have inferred from the fluidity and transparency of water that it would suffocate him, or from the light and warmth of fire that it would consume him. No object ever discovers by the qualities which appear to the senses either the causes which has produced it or the effects which will arise from it, nor can reason, unassisted by experience, ever draw any inference concerning the real existence in matter of fact. Okay, so add an example. Adam could walk the Garden of Eden, see water. He wouldn't know if he plunged his head into there for a certain amount of time that it would suffocate him. You know, you just can't know that a priori, right? Or, imagine this. I don't have an unknown object to you in my office, I don't reckon. But suppose I have a gonculator. That's what I'll call it, right here. It's got wires and gadgets, maybe gears and things like that. If I ask you, what are its causes and what are its effects? A priori, you couldn't tell me that, right? You couldn't, not just from looking at the thing for the first time. So our knowledge of cause and effect isn't a priori. Next paragraph. This proposition that causes and effects are discoverable not by reason but by experience will readily be admitted with regard to such objects as we remember to have once been altogether unknown to us, since we must be conscious of the utter inability with which we then lay under foretelling what would arise from them. Okay, so check this out. Present 2 smooth pieces of marble to a man who has no tincture of natural philosophy. He will never discover that they will adhere together in such a manner as to require great force to separate them in a direct line, while they make no small resistance to a lateral pressure. Okay, so if I had 2 flat pieces of marble and I put them together like this, it is almost impossible to separate them this way. Did you know that? However, doing it like that, or like that, or like that, or like that, no problem. You couldn't know that a priori, could you? I bet most of you didn't know that at all. Okay? Such events as bear little analogy to the common course of nature also readily confess to be known only by experience, nor does any man imagine that the explosion of gunpowder or the attraction of a lone stroke could ever be discovered by a priori arguments. Okay? You got to have experience. Okay? Check this out. No amount of observation of oxygen will tell us that when mixed with hydrogen, it produces water. Right? Skip a paragraph. Look at the last paragraph on 589. But to convince us that all laws of nature and all operations of bodies without exception are known only by experience, the following reflections may perhaps suffice. Were any object presented to us, and were required to pronounce concerning the effect which will result from it without consulting past observation, how could you do that? After what manner, I beseech you, must the mind proceed in this operation? It must invent or imagine some event which describes the object its effect, and it is plain that this invention must be entirely arbitrary, unless you can appeal to past experience. The mind can never possibly find the effect and supposed cause by the most accurate scrutiny and examination. Check this out. For the effect is totally different from the cause, and consequently can never be discovered in it. Motion in the second billiard ball is quite a distinct event from motion in the first, nor is there anything in the one to suggest the smallest hint of the other. A stone or piece of metal raised in the air without any support immediately falls. But to consider the matter a priori, is there anything we discover in this situation which can beget the idea of downward rather than upward of the motion of the stone or the metal? Okay, so a billiard ball, picture a pool table, right? You have 2 billiard balls. This one comes, hits that one, that one goes that way. Why do you expect that? Because it's always been that way. But a priori, suppose every time you saw 2 billiard balls hit one another, it went boop, 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 went straight up. Or it that one came back again. Or that went that way. Or that way. Right? I mean, there is, if it always happened that way, that's what you would expect. You cannot find any necessary cause, any necessary relationship between those two. That's just the way stuff happens. Right? That's just the way stuff happens. The second full paragraph on 590, this is a short one. In a word, then, every effect is a distinct event from its cause. It could not therefore be discovered in the cause, and the first invention or conception of it a priori must be entirely arbitrary. Every effect is a distinct event from its cause. Okay? And even after it's suggested, the conjunction of it with the cause must appear equally arbitrary, since there are always many other effects which to reason may seem fully consistent and natural. In vain, therefore, should we pretend to examine a single event or infer any cause or effect without the assistance of observation and experience. Okay, but notice this. What about this necessary connection? Okay? This necessary connection. But notice this. neither contiguity, priority, nor constant conjunction. Remember, those were the three relations between that senses can give us between cause and effect between two things, right? But neither contiguity, priority, nor constant conjunction. None of this implies a necessary connection between objects. Okay? There is no evident cause in one billiard ball hitting another and then moving it. Analyze it. Where do you see cause? You see this one move, you see it use that one, and you see that one move. That's all you see. Okay? That's it. One thing happens, then another. Further, no amount of observation of oxygen will tell us that when mixed with hydrogen it produces water. Where do we get this idea? Okay? These things just happen in sequence. Where do we get this idea? Do we get it from the rationalist? Is the rationalist right? No, says Hume. Okay, check it out. From outer impressions alone, you cannot get causality. Take the billiard ball example again. No causality there. But every time you see one thing hit another, every time you see two things hit, one of them moves. This happens very regularly. Okay? So my inner impressions abstract this, and I come to expect the second ball to move. Thus, causality is not a quality in the objects we observe, at least not one we can detect, but it is a habit of association in the mind by repeated observation of A following B. By the way, Hume notes that if we could experience necessary connection, all superstition would vanish. But we can't. Okay? Thus, A causes B. Let's check this out. Okay, since we do have this idea of cause and effect, Hume shows that we can't get it from outer impressions alone, but he has to show us how we can come up with the idea. And now here's how Hume does this. A causes B means when I consider A and it occurs, then I cannot help but expect B to occur. I feel it. The feeling of expectation gives me causality. Guess what? It isn't out there. It's in here. Okay? Now, by the way, it may or may not be out there, but if it is, you could never, ever, ever show me that it is. Causality, you see, is a statement about us, not about the world out there. Okay? Then in sum, from causes which appear similar, we expect similar effects. This is the sum of all of our experimental conclusions. Now, why do we expect it? We expect it because of custom or habit. Okay. This is a huge notion in Hume. And custom is the everyday observation of cause and effect. But we got to carry it even more than that, okay? It's our very being in the world. Right now, I assume you're sitting in a chair. You don't question whether that chair will hold you up. You just sit in it, right? You're walking across the floor. You're assuming, if you walk across the floor, you're assuming that the floor will hold you up. They're just going to fall through it. You know that, okay? But think up also about all of our habits. Okay, let's look at it like this. If you had to guess what percentage of the things we do through the course of a day are done from habit. Now, usually when I ask this question in class, they'll say, oh, maybe half, maybe 3/4 and all that. No. It is in the high 90s%. Seriously. Think about all the things you do that you don't have to think about. Okay? Tie your shoes, brush your teeth, eat, start your car. Wash your hair, shampoo, brush your teeth, all those things are by habit. Okay, y'all, I'm not a morning person, okay? And my wife knows that before I'm about halfway through that second cup of coffee, not to ask me anything. I mean, I am on total autopilot when I first get up. Okay? But yet, I get a lot done. How do I do that? Habit. And if my habits, if something interrupts them, I get grumpy. Okay? Habits. Have you ever driven somewhere? When you get there, you think, how the heck did I just get here? And you realize, that's habit, that's custom, right? Custom tells me, look, that if I want to turn this light off, I flip the switch. That's what I do, right? Flip the switch. That's what I do. Okay, custom tells me that. Custom tells me when I start my car, I put the key in, I turn it on. Okay? I mean, custom is just, this rules our life. It rules our life, and it makes our lives possible. And it's a very good thing that we have it. Okay? On 595, Hume has a long paragraph that describes custom. Okay? That goes on to 596. I mean, he goes on, basically says all these things a lot of these things I just said, not quite the way I did. Of course, I updated them. But to his conclusion of this right here, custom then is the great guide of human life. It is that principle alone which renders our experience useful to us and makes us expect for the future a similar train of events with those which have appeared in the past. Without the influence of custom, we should be entirely ignorant of every matter of fact beyond what is immediately present to the memory and senses. We should never know how to adjust means to ends or to employ our natural powers of production of any effect. There would be an end at once of all action as well as a chief party of speculation. Okay, imagine without custom, you would have to think about everything you ever did. How do I tie my shoes? How do I eat? How do I have... we would be paralyzed. We could never get by. We could never get anything done. Custom rules, as we will see. Okay? Now, in part 2 of this section, Hume answers an important question. Given that the mind associates ideas, and all this is really rather mechanical, and given custom, how do we distinguish between belief and fiction? I mean, the mind can take simple ideas from experience and associate the dickens out of them, extract them to the wildest points, and we can voluntarily and wildly make stuff up. We can, he says, join the head of a man to the body of a horse. But, and this is a big but, it is not within our power to actually believe that such an animal ever really existed. Okay? 597 and 598, he discusses this, but his solution to it is towards the bottom of that page, about halfway from that second paragraph in the first column of 598. He ends up making this distinction between the two, similar to the way he distinguishes between impressions and ideas. Okay? Quotation here. I say then that belief is nothing more than a more lively, vivid, forcible, firm, steady conception of an object than what the imagination alone is ever to attain. By the way, we cannot fully explain the difference because the distinction is based in sentiment. Okay? That is, it's based, excuse me, it's based in custom. Now, why do we work this way? Well, we don't really know. But it's a good thing we do, by the way, because it surely allows us to get along in the world. I mean, again, imagine having to think about absolutely everything you did. You would never get there. Okay? So it allows us to get along in the world. Our habits generally serve us well. Okay? And, after all, sentiment is much more powerful than rationality ever dreamed of. So, all of our reasoning about cause and effect is really reasoning about probability. Let's say I have a die, right, in my hand right here, and I roll it 5 times. Every time I do it, it comes up 3. What are the odds it will come up 3 a 6th time? Of course, we know that it was the same as the first time. It's 1 out of 6, right? It's always 1 out of 6 every single time. Okay? Now, if a die has a 3 on all but one of its 6 sides, then I will expect the 3 to come up more. Right? The mind is simply drawn to this, to the belief. Two events with regular occurrence together, we expect those to occur together. Okay? So that our analysis of cause and effect is ultimately, again, like probability. The greater number outweighs the smaller, and we're compelled to believe it. Okay? Now, we're going to go ahead and do just a little bit more to save plenty of time for next time, because next time is a big one of miracles. But in section 7, Hume discusses a necessary connection, the idea of necessary connection. This is, of course, related to a discussion of cause and effect, and it's clearly and directly aimed right at the rationalist. Okay? On page 5, that's page 603, quotation up there. On 603, he writes, there are no ideas which occur in metaphysics more obscure and uncertain than those of power, force, energy, or necessary connection. Okay? Hume wants to fix this problem and work out the precise meaning of those terms. His analysis here is, again, similar to his analysis of cause and effect. Okay? Our knowledge of these ideas comes only from experience and the work of custom. And experience doesn't give us these things as necessary. Custom does that, right? That is to say, these are as subjective as our knowledge about cause and effect. Remember, cause and effect is more of a notion about us. Okay? They are the product of passions and a sentiment. So the whole notion that there is a necessary connection between cause and effect amounts to no more than the following up here. First, a repeated sequence of impressions, the expectation that on its next occurrence, the first impression of the sequence will again be followed by the second. That's it. There is no reason in the nature of things why any event should not be followed by any other event whatsoever. It just so happens that some events follow other events consistently, sometimes completely and absolutely consistently, constant conjunction. So this becomes our expectation. By the way, this is all there is to causality. Okay? If Hume is correct in this, the sciences are limited to historical statements. They can only report past observations. Sciences are limited to saying, event X has always been followed by event Y. Further, we have no rational basis, reason in relation to ideas, right, for believing that this will continue to be the case, or even that it will probably be the case. We have no rational belief for believing that one thing is more probable than anything else. It's all habit, it's all in here, it's all expectation, it's all subjective. Okay? For Hume, every datum is loose and separate, such that every event is a brand new event. We start from scratch every moment. Inductive inference is not a way of reaching rationally justified conclusions. It's a leap in the dark. Remember, for every matter of fact, the contrary is still possible, because its opposite can never imply a contradiction. Yes, Hume has made science into nonsense. Oops. Because induction is dead. Finally, for this section, Hume deals with the more extreme rationalist assertion that God is the guarantor of cause and effect and necessity in general. And I say note 606 and 607, okay, that very long paragraph, I'm going to just commend that to you and summarize it. But in here, Tells me how philosophers like to believe that God engineers things to their minutest degree. That God determines the universe, that God guarantees all this stability and all of that. Think about Descartes' God recreating the world at each moment, right? That's kind of clearly he may be getting at that and other things like that, right? So Deus ex machina, that God guarantees all of this stuff. Okay. Then, page 607. Second column, first paragraph. Thus, according to these philosophers who believe this way, everything is full of God, not content with the principle that nothing exists but by his will, that nothing possesses any power but by his concession. They rob nature and all created beings of every power in order to render their dependence on the deity still more sensible and immediate. They do not consider that by this theory they diminish instead of magnifying the grandeur of those attributes which they affect so much to celebrate. It argues surely more power in the deity to delegate a certain degree of power to inferior creatures than to produce everything by his own immediate volition. It argues more wisdom to contrive at first the fabric of the world with such perfect foresight that of itself and by its proper operation it may serve all the purposes of providence than if the great Creator were obliged every moment to adjust its parts, animate by his breath the wheels of that stupendous machine. Think about Leibniz's pre-established harmony, right? So God robs the world of much of its significance if everything is engineered to the last nth degree. Okay? Finally here, note that the last paragraph of this section on 610 is an excellent summary of Hume's position on cause and effect. Mark that, please. That one right there is a great guide. That one is awesome. Okay? So, your assignment. I think we can reach back and do this. I'm hoping we can reach back and do this. Based on what you've learned about Hume, how would he criticize Descartes' causal doctrine? Remember, for Descartes, the cause must have at least as much reality as the effect that it has, because the cause is what gives the effect its reality. Where else could it get it from? That section, you know what? Remember where Descartes discusses this? There we go. I want to get you there. Here we go. The third meditation. Page 49 to 50. Okay, that is Hume. That is Descartes' statement of the causal doctrine. So if you want to look at that, go ahead, and then talk about how Hume would criticize that, and we just did that. Okay. Have a good one. This should be probably a page and a half, maybe two at most. All right. See ya.